Hi, I'm Danielle Heller. This is a book that I wrote in 2016 for my grandparents, Normal Waika and Marbeth Waika, who lived for many, many years, the duration of their lives in South Dakota. And in the book, I hope that it captures a little bit of what South Dakota used to be like when it was very, very cold outside. A friend of mine illustrated it. His name is Jim Gibbs. He was a art teacher in Jefferson County for many, many years. And I hope that you enjoy the story. A Christmas Eve Ghost Story. Dedicated to Normal and Marbeth Waika and children everywhere. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when Tommy and Jane hung tinsel and lights as they set up the train. They heard Mother laughing while she worked at the stove, cooking stuffing and turkey and cookies in rows. Their dad stood behind her, his usual thing, with a taste and a tickle, and out of tune singing. The radio announcer with his loud boisterous booms shared the weather and news and played holiday tunes. A snappy song started, and the very next thing, Mom tugged at Dad's arm, making him swing. With a twirl and a whirl they traveled the floor. In her eyes you could see it was him she adored. They were new to this country. In fact, they'd just moved. They were hoping the change would bring blessings and prove that even in winter, no matter the cold, change turns to adventure, granting memories to hold. The dancing subsided, then Tommy and Jane went away to go sledding across the great plain. The sky was hung low with clouds of great depth as the snow flurries fell and the air froze their breath. They trudged through the snow that rose up to their knees. They lost track of the time and got caught in the sea of forever, all covered with snow, where your home might be, but you never would know. The sunlight was fading, the temperature dropped, the wind circled round, the storm ceased to stop. Some shelter was needed, a house or a barn, a place to stay hidden, a place that was warm. And then Jane, she heard it, a faint floating sound, the sound of soft voices, of chorals around. We must follow the voices. I think it's a sign of something most holy, out of sight, out of time. And that's when they glimpsed it, the house on the hill, a large, elegant house, full of light and great frill. A child stood waving from the very top room, as if to say, come up, see me soon. Both Tommy and Jane ran as fast as they could. They knocked on the door and brushed off where they stood, on a very great threshold, where present meets past, where time is not ticking and memories last. The sacred it lingers, though centuries pass. The spark of truth carries what those lost may lack. Just then the door opened. There stood a tall man, with long black suit jacket, white gloves on his hands. He ushered them in, took snow coats and snow pants, led them to a room full of guests in a dance. The waltz and the tango, the reel and the jig, and something called square dance that looked really big. The girl from the window rushed down the wide stairs. She was tiny and pale and free of sad cares. Her dress reached the floor, trimmed with ribbon and lace. Her hair was tied back, with a wisp in her face. She held out her arms and embraced them with glee. Her name was Linnea, Twin Flowers Royalty. and the beautiful doll that she clutched to her tight, a mirror-like reflection with eyes wide and bright. She spoke in a whisper, inviting them in to a room that was gleaming in holiday trim. A Christmas tree stood by the fire to one side, in the middle folks waltzing with a 1, 2, 3 glide. Off in one corner lay a table ornate, decked with plenty of sweets on a gold and white plate. The children played hopscotch, jacks, tag, hide and seek. They drew faces on slate and round corners did peek. But the very best thing that Jane loved above all were the beautiful dresses that swished through the hall. While back at the farmhouse, the hours ticked by, Mom looked at the window as she finished a pie. Tom and Jane are not home. Oh, what should we do? Perhaps they've found shelter somewhere by the slough. Anne, Jane replied, this storm is a chase. If they're to survive, we must pick up the pace. I'll go take a look in the yard round the barn. If they make it back home, that's a place they'd stay warm. With a rope round his waist and attached to the house, he trudged to the barn, but found only a mouse. From his head to his toes, all covered in snow, he burst into the kitchen. His eyes were aglow. Let's call Sergeant Sven and Deputy Norm, the ones who might save them from this cold winter storm. Then, quick as a wink, Mom grabbed the receiver, and down to the station she called in a fever. Our children are missing somewhere in the snow. They ran off to go sledding. Oh, where did they go? Out on the prairie, 'tween hither and yon, were Tommy and Jane, all snugly and warm. As the grandfather clock struck a note for each hour, the guests praised the pudding, still sprinkled with flour. Linnea's sweet mother beckoned all to the room where the turkey lay steaming, 'twixt knife, fork, and spoon. The dinner began, and her father did toast, to our guests, and good food, to our house and our host. And with this he looked into each person's face, smiling brightly, giving thanks, a spectacular grace. Every bite was delicious, each more than the last, eating this, drinking that, as the minutes rushed past. With stomachs content, Tom and Jane wished to play, so they summoned Linnea, and all three rushed away. The presents lay open just under the tree. They played blocks, read a book, sang a song, and drank tea. The night vanished quickly. No one could believe when the clock clamored midnight, and all took their leave. The butler, he helped them as their new friend looked on, wrapping scarves, zipping jackets, and soon they were gone. The blizzard subsided, now only the moon stood watch o'er the prairie. They'd make it home soon. Over field and past fences, then up one great hill, they caught a small glimpse of their home further still. The windows were lit, and the chimney curled smoke. Wait! Something is different. Jane stopped as she spoke. On the snow, at the gate that they had to go through, gleamed lights blinking brightly, colored red, white, and blue. A police car stood waiting, parked right by the barn. It was driven by Sven, but polished by Norm. Tom peered in the kitchen. Through the old window pane, his mother was crying, and his father explained the evening's events as he paced round the floor. Policemen in jackets stood just in the door. The gate squeaked as they passed. No one could believe they had made it home safe from the endless snow sea. The children came quickly, the house warm and bright, with Christmas lights gleaming. Oh my, what a sight! The questions kept coming. How did you survive in the cold and the snow? We're glad you're alive. Mom made up hot chocolate, Dad brought in warm clothes, and Deputy Norm wiped a tear from his nose. Next, Tommy and Jane recounted their tale, stepping into the past, turning Sergeant Sven pale. "I remember," Sven whispered, "a story Mom told of a great northern family with a house grand and bold. Especially at Christmas and every New Year, folks rode in for miles to take part in the cheer." He pointed and motioned way out on the plains, where the snow still lay silent in the moon's bright lit frame. That was long ago, 71 years at least, round 1883, the date of the feast. The night when the house burned to ash in a fire, and legends of sightings it would live to inspire. "What happened? What happened to the family?" cried Jane. "Did they live to survive through the smoke and the flame?" "You see, that's the mystery," Sven said, scratching his head. "They weren't found again, either living or dead. But travelers say on some cold winter's eves you can hear joyous singing. It's hard to believe that perhaps there's a place somewhere we just don't know, free of fears and regrets, sheltered deep in the snow." And with that he stood, grabbed his coat from the floor, tipped his hat, winked at Jane, and walked straight out the door. "Merry Christmas!" Norm cheered. "We're glad you're all right. All is well that ends well. Sweet dreams and good night." As spring came singing across the great plains, it was time to go plowing for Dad, Tom, and Jane. They fired up the tractor to go for a ride. Tom sat on Dad's knee, and Jane sat by his side. Over hill, over dale, they rode far and wide, till the plow stopped abruptly, and right by its side you could see the burnt features of a house or a barn, chunks of wood, rocks, and stone, crisped and charred, most forlorn. And then Jane, she spied it, just under the dirt, perhaps an old rag, some pants, or a shirt. But as she drew closer she started to see 'twas Linnea's toy doll she had snuggled with glee. She brushed it off gently and wiggled it free, untouched by the ages, twin flower royalty. As she clutched the doll tightly, Jane saw something fall, a note with some writing, surprising them all. "Dear Tommy and Jane, it's my time to go. You shared in my dream, asleep in the snow. I leave you my doll to keep warm and safe. Remember the night to my house you did stray? No matter your trouble, your fear, or your woe, just squeeze the doll tight, and soon she will show the way to a path that will bring you back here, out of time, out of sight, no matter what year." And with that, Jane grabbed both the doll and the note, jumped back on the tractor, which started to go way back to the farmhouse. They rode in a hurry to show Mom their treasure and relieve her of worry. So someday, if you find yourself deep in the snow and you can't see beyond all the troubles you know, remember the story of Tommy and Jane, who set out to go sledding across the Great Plain. The end.